I hope you enjoy this special episode from the Idea Citizen Summit, Entrepreneurship and Startups, presented by Cohesion, Smart Building Technology. Learn more at cohesionib.com.
Nothing will stop us from this amazing conversation today. I thought we would start by introducing ourselves. Mike, let's start with you.
Awesome. I'm based out of San Diego. I am a technologist. I have been writing software for close to 4 decades now. I left a role as a principal software engineer to start creating coding careers. And these days spend a lot of time helping people understand and talking to groups about apprenticeship and entrepreneurship and how it can be a catalyst for growth within the organizations.
Happy Friday, Junior, everybody. My name is Marisa Andrada. I like to call myself a culture master and kindness catalyst because I've been living this calling at the first 30 years of my career in human resources. But I believe I've been put in this world to profoundly and joyfully connect people to one another in service to creating an opportunity for everybody. And I've had the chance to do that at founder-led organizations that scaled very quickly. And in my career, I've had the chance to serve as a chief people officer at brands like Chipotle, Kate Spade, Starbucks, GameStop, and Red Bull, and when the brand was being created here. And I've had the chance to serve over 1 million employees. So I think about what we're talking about today and this kind of purpose and values-driven leadership, and I'm excited to share that. Today, I actually am working with some founders to build out a company called Woof.work. It is, if you think about best pet workplaces and great places to work, it's that times pets times TED. I will leave you with that because I'm excited to get in this conversation with everybody else.
Wow, that is exciting. And I love the glasses, by the way. Just had to let you know.
Thank you.
Gerard, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you for having me. Good to be here with you all. My name's Gerard Longo, the founder and CEO of Underground Music Collective. We are a educational multimedia platform based in Nashville, Tennessee, but right now I'm not in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm actually in London for South by Southwest London, the first ever. We're here chatting with some folks, meeting some partners, and looking at how we want to connect our world of artistpreneurs to each other. So that's what we do, is we encourage artists to think and move and connect like entrepreneurs. I've been on this journey myself for going on 12 years. It'll be 12 years in August since I launched the Quinn Spin, which is our official podcast at UMC. That was the origin point of our whole ecosystem. And the creative journey is just that. It's a journey, and it's something that takes you to places you never expect. Like when we all signed up for this panel, I did not expect to be in London doing it, but here we are. And I'm excited to talk about that journey and where it leads and, the things to keep in mind as we embark upon it.
Well, that's exciting that you're joining us from London. And for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Wendy Shore. It rhymes with entrepreneur, and I have been in the entrepreneurial space for 25, 30 years. Yes, I started when I was 2. No, just kidding. And I love conversations about scaling. And I think there's so many different perspectives, right? And when we talk about scaling, it's scaling your business, it's scaling your products, it's scaling the company, it's scaling the entire business model, right? So I know we've talked a little bit behind the scenes about it, and I'm really excited to dive in. And Marisa, I think I want to pass the mic to you first, because one is I wanted to first get your understanding. We're going to ask everybody, like, what when you think of scaling, what exactly do you think about? And then you said you were in the middle of working on like pets, like 10xing pets, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about it.
Okay, great. And actually, Gerard, I'm cracking up. You're South by Southwest by East, right? If you're in London. So that's wild. I'm a Nashvilleian too, but I'm sitting in New York, so kind of closer to you. Anyway, let's talk about what growth means to me in scaling. And it's not really just the act of how do you continue to grow in terms of top line, bottom line, people, et cetera, in a sustainable way. I think at the foundation of scaling is just what we're all here to talk about, is really about making sure that there's real clarity around strategy, around capability, around purpose. And I say this, I'll share with you, having worked at these brands that really scaled very quickly and in a sustainable way. And say Starbucks, I went there after Howard Schultz came back the first time, and it was about turning around the business. I will share with you high level right now, and the secrets that people all have, at least what I've seen CEOs and founders finally hone in on to get to that sustainable, foundation-driven, purpose-driven scaling. It is about getting real clarity of your purpose and your values. So who you are and what you stand for, as much as it's important to have clarity on strategy and that it's simple. I think the next piece to having seen these companies successfully scale and be part of that is that the North Star, the lens to make decisions, how you see people, how you hire people, how you motivate them is all based on purpose and values. And so we can dive into the detail around that, but I think it's a reflection of the kind of culture you're creating. And I've been really fortunate to have been part of brands where there's a very strong consumer brand. And I always say this to people, the brand cannot be true to your consumers unless the employees inside the company really feel it and believe it. And that is all based on purpose and value. So I'll start with that because I know we've got some other panelists who have some amazing perspectives on it. Really quickly on woof.work, which I have, or Woof World, which is the current company that I'm working on. I've been part of helping to build out this company. The founders I met a few years ago, and it was more of a social platform initially. So if you think about the biggest epidemic right now is loneliness coming out of COVID. And it's so important to foster human connections. And so they started doing so by bringing people out in Southern California, whether or not you had a dog or a pet. People came to this thing called Saturday Dog Club. And within a year, over 25,000 people throughout the communities of LA came out to connect. And so what they were hearing, and I've been a part of those, hearing from a lot of the citizens coming in was, now I'm being asked to return to the office, no matter how small or large the office is, I need to go back. And pets are part of my family. They either became part of it or they already are. And there's this level of agita that's happening with now, how do I take care of them? And I wish my employer understood the importance of pets in my life. And so fast forward, if I think about the role companies and cultures play, again, going based on purpose and values, we actually work with companies, a lot of Fortune 1000, a lot of startups as well, to really recognize their pet supportive policies and programs. This does not mean that you bring pets to the workplace. Only 7% of offices allow that in the US, but there are other ways that you can recognize that pets are important to the employees. And so it is like Great Places to Work times pets. And then it's definitely a content platform where a lot of people share stories about it. So that's what I'll share.
I love that. And 2 days a week I work as a fractional CFO, and I'm in that office right now, which is why I don't have my home background, but we do have a dog in the office. They do have
Yes.
pets. Yes. So, and it's lovely, right? Especially when he runs in here and he just wants to get some pets. It just gives you that like warm feeling inside. So, pets are definitely a part of our family. And I love that. Gerard, I'm going to pass it over to you. I want to hear a little bit about what you're working on, what scaling means to you in your business right now. And, just give us your take on it.
Absolutely. And we're at a very interesting time in our history right now at Underground Music Collective because we are actively scaling in terms of the team, adding some very valuable members to our team. I want to give a big shout out to my guy, Joe Boz, is essentially our COO here at UMC, who is helping me take my pie in the sky ideas and really rein them in. We all need somebody like that. I tend to be very big picture, and to have that guy who comes in or that gal who comes in and is like, okay, but here's what we need to do now, here are the steps we need to take, is so valuable. And I think just in general, like identifying the right members of your team to bring into the fold, not only from a skills standpoint, but from a culture standpoint. Marisa, you mentioned values, and that's something that's just so important to us, and especially in an industry as creative as music and as personal as music can be, we encourage not only our artists, but ourselves to operate from that place of their own values as the starting point. As a one-on-one consultant, because I do brand consulting as well with artists and other creatives, we start values, mission, and vision. So the values are, why do you want to create? The mission is, of course, what do your values inspire you to create? And the vision is, what does that look like, sound like, and feel like? And it's been interesting as I've coached, as I've consulted, that so much of that work comes back around to us. And it's like, okay, what is really on brand for us? What is really, core to who we are and why we do what we do. And how do we communicate that? Through the way we work with artists, through the community that we're building, right? Through the live experiences, through the content that we put out. It reflects this ethos of giving creators the power. And another thing that we're doing to scale right now in the community building sense is we just launched our virtual community. It's called The Underdogs. You can learn more about it at community.umc. And it's a place for people to connect, whether they're musicians, whether they're creatives who are adjacent to musicians, and to share resources, to share knowledge, opportunities across genres, across markets, of course, across creative disciplines. And so we're not only scaling internally, but we're scaling externally by bringing more people into the fold from the artist perspective, from the consumer and client perspective, and figuring out how to best serve them. And it's been a really exciting time. It's been a super exciting year. It's taken us tons of wonderful places. And with each place we go, with each interaction we have, and each person that comes in the fold, we learn something new. And so it's an exciting time because we're actively in the process of it, right? And it's that balance of like, okay, how do we grow this platform to the level that we know we can grow this platform while also making sure our creative ethos stays intact, right? Also making sure that we're consistently offering opportunities that put the power in the creator's hands to think and move and connect with each other like entrepreneurs. So that's where we're at right now. It's been an exciting process. It's been a challenging process. It's certainly teaching me more and more and more about leadership as we go, but there's so much value in it, because not only does it help sharpen our sword as far as what we're bringing to the world, but it's also helping us help the artists and the creatives we work with have the impact that they want to have.
I love that. I love that. It's funny because you both mentioned the importance of people, and scaling sometimes means adding people on, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm going to come back around to that later. But I read a post by Gary Vaynerchuk the other day, and his actual post said, I don't know if I could say that on here, but I'm just going to say it anyway: fire the assholes, right? Like, your people are your most important asset. And if somebody's the best at what they do, but they're a jerk, they don't belong in your culture if you really want to take care of your other people. And, I loved it. I love what he said about that, because if somebody is the best at what they do, but it's like a cancer that spreads from the inside out, unfortunately, right? It eats away at everybody else. And when you allow people to be talked to in a really bad way, or you allow things to go on, salesperson who delivers the most but's always late and brings down the morale of, when you have multiple people working for you, not when you're a solopreneur, it ruins the culture that I feel like both of you are trying to aspire to.
It says a lot about the values you're talking about. If you value jerks in the workplace, then you're going to have a toxic workplace. So I love that you quoted that. It's like kind of a no asshole policy. Do not hire them, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I
do
second
love
that as
that.
well. You definitely I personally don't want to work with the talented jerk. I would rather work with somebody who is developing their talent, but puts their best effort forward, is amazing with people, wants to learn. I think that's such an important thing, no matter where you are on the entrepreneurial journey, is a willingness to be a student. And that, if somebody's coming in thinking they have all the answers, acting like they have all the answers, that's going to upset the culture, especially in music, where people do tend to be more sensitive, where people do tend to, put more of their feeling, their passion into their work, in a creative field, like, just personal responsibility I think each of us have to be sensitive to each other's feelings, to each other's skill sets, to what we know and we don't know, right? So you want to make sure that culture's in line, and that, again, there's so much in our industry about ethics and what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
There's so many horror stories in the music industry about bad deals and bad actors, right? We want to make sure we're bringing in the people who are doing good work for the right reasons, are community minded, and feed the overall vision and the big picture rather than just serving themselves and their own ends.
Right. I think the purpose of values, goes both ways, right? Get real clear on the values and who you are as a company and articulate that as you invite other people to join your journey, right? And so that they also buy into those values. But I also say this to solopreneurs, to employees joining companies: also make sure your values are aligned to their values. So, because you're going to be miserable if you're not. And I always find that you'll find purpose in life when you're living your values as well, and you're putting all this energy.
You can't just say it and have it written here like these are our
No.
values and then act completely opposite to what you say, because then there's a complete disconnect. And I want to go to Mike first. I have another thought, but Mike, you've been a little bit quiet there, and I really want to hear from you. I'm passing the baton to you because I want to get your take on values and also your business, and how do you frame scaling? What does that look like to you?
Fortunately, as a software engineer, I've had an opportunity to work with lots of great dogs and few jerks. So I've been lucky. We tend to fit into a space where we see that opportunity and possibility and a disconnect around the ability for folks to have access to career pathways that can lead to high wage, high growth jobs. So we sit squarely in a place where, I like to say we're developing this playbook for earn and learn pathways and really helping to amplify the message that we have all of the resources that we need as a nation to become an apprenticeship first type nation or apprenticeship degree nation as well. And we really need to reframe how we think about the social contract we have in education and scaling human capital to meet the needs of companies and businesses. For me, it's a lot of evangelizing. I think some people, when I say the word apprenticeship, they think I said internship, and they don't have a very good mental model of what that means and how it could be used as a lever to scale their businesses. What I found when I left my job as a principal software engineer and went out and started working at an amazing coding bootcamp, we were changing people's lives, but it still required a high degree of freedom and luxury for folks to be able to sort of like pick up their lives and for 4 months go on a sabbatical and learn how to code. And so, we're plodding along, making these amazing life-changing journeys for folks happen. And suddenly the school just stops and is shuttered. And I have to decide, do I want to go back to a life as a principal software engineer and, build product, or do I want to sort of lean into entrepreneurship? And I decided to start creating coding careers with the core mission of providing access and affordability to education in a more career technical education oriented pathway. And so often what I'm called to speak and share is that when a team wants the inside track on scaling human capital, they should look to a tried and true pattern that's almost as old as can be, which is like having a master teach a up and coming apprentice a trade or a skill. And often those skills today could include very, predominantly white collar roles. So you think of accountants, lawyers, software engineers, cybersecurity, all of these are apprenticeable pathways where someone with very little skill can learn a lot of the job on the job. But there's also an element where they can also get academic credit for the things that they're learning on the job. And we can really flip this idea we have about education being, and great high quality education being, only coming directly from college or prestigious universities. And instead, it really should encompass a lot more work-based learning. So the key, I think, for organizations to being able to have access to a new pool of talent is to think differently about where they source their talent, and then be organizations that can really lean into lifelong learning and create true pathways for talent development versus, I think in a lot of cases, there's more lip service than actual infrastructure within growing organizations that can facilitate them being able to bring people in and have them move up the career ladder within that organization and stay sticky, remain there. This is a great way to attract and retain great talent in a time where people have lots of options.
Oh my gosh, I love your idea of people sustainability. I know I am not a tech person. I think that's why I fell in love with retail and restaurants, because if you work really hard, you can actually go from making minimum wage to making a middle class wage in as soon as a year, because it's there for the taking. And I agree with you. There are ways now that companies can think about people sustainability. It is about looking at the resources within and what are you doing to build skills. And especially now with AI enablement, upskilling people and helping them to do that. There are ways companies, even large companies, can take the training that they're doing, the apprenticeships that they're creating, and actually credential people. Right? So get real credentials, which are marketable elsewhere if people choose to leave, and or have them certified to align to a 2 or 4 year degree. I mean, that's happening now with other education companies.
You know
I
what
think
just jumped
that
in my head? I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I just think that, notion of professional development is so important to retaining talent as well, especially post COVID. So many more people are leaning into their purpose, right? And so if you're going to keep somebody with your company for the long haul and hope to grow and scale with them, you need to give them something to look forward to as far as the professional development, the future opportunities that are coming, and what it's like for them to be a part of that culture as it grows. Covering employee before I was an entrepreneur. Sorry, there's a phone ringing in the background. As a recovering employee before I was an entrepreneur, I can tell you that like all the pizza parties and little happy hours in the world aren't going to do anything to help you retain talent if your company's culture and the trajectory of growth for the people in it isn't good, is subpar, right? So you always, as a leader, need to be thinking, okay, how can the people that I'm recruiting and attracting and hoping to retain on my team as we scale, what's in it for them? What value am I providing them as professionals in exchange for the value that I hope they provide me?
I
Fair
mean,
value
that's
exchange
yeah,
across the
that's a
board.
key point. That is the number one reason why millennials, not to code out and characterize anybody, and even Gen Z, the reason why they don't stay is they don't see that career progression and ability to grow and learn new skills.
And along those lines, what I was going to say, which was right, exactly kind of what you said is, there's that sort of idiom of what if I teach them and they leave? But then the other question is, well, what if you don't and they stay? Right. So you're much better off investing in your people. And you know what? You left, you became an entrepreneur. We all, I left. Well, I was in corporate for a really short time. And by the way, Marisa, I have a background as an accountant, Mike, and I learned more on the job than I did getting my degree. So there is definitely something to be said for on the job. But if you invest in people, right, you're right. I noticed that they do tend to stay. And those who are going to leave and become entrepreneurs are going to leave whether you invest in them or not. But while they're there, they do a much better job for you. And the other thing is I kind of want to put all of it together because I owned 7 restaurants and I really hired for personality because you can teach people skills. But then I realized as I got, larger and I scaled, there comes a time or a position where you have to hire. If you're looking outside of your organization, you have to hire skill because it's a higher level. You can teach people, but sometimes you don't have the time to teach people. So you need to bring in people who fit your culture, who have the skill already, while still educating and teaching everybody else to get them to that level so that maybe the next time you're expanding, you're hiring from within the organization.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a really hard challenge especially for early startups to navigate because the pressure from maybe venture capital or private equity when you get to a certain size is sort of this constant foot on the gas, got to move fast. There's not enough time for us to really think strategically about our human capital needs and bite the bullet in many cases and say, we're going to resist the urge to bring someone in and go a little faster temporarily versus giving some opportunities to some internal candidates to maybe grow. And maybe this is beyond their skill set today, but it can be a great way for you to, again, retain them long term, use some of their other transferable skills, their knowledge of the business that, that they're in versus having an outside person come into the organization. That's a tough challenge. And I feel like a lot of organizations look at talent as a cost and not an investment. And so that mentality coupled with need to move fast is, I think today, the way I see it manifested is in sort of the layoffs and the churn in the thought process among some leadership that AI is comparable resource to a human being. And regardless of whether or not folks believe that AI is or isn't living up to its hype, I can tell you as a technologist that you always want to bet for the human in the loop and bet big on investing on people and think more about the investment and growth than trying to save by slashing and reducing staff. It's a big expense, but it's an investment that needs to be made if you want to grow and not
Yeah.
stagnate, right? And I think a lot of folks are forgetting that if you augment an early career professional right now with AI, they will become more productive faster. And so again, it's about, from my perspective, how do you ramp folks versus trying to look at it as only a cost and a cost saving measure to sort of throttle the number of souls and seats that you have in your organization. right?
Well, I think
And that's
that's
a money
where,
before people culture.
yeah. Well, I also think you have to move slow before you move fast. And I think about, again, these brands I've been a part of, that at the very beginning, when you're really clear on the strategy, like what it is you're trying to accomplish, part of that strategy is identifying capability. So what capabilities, let's put people aside for a little bit, but understand the capabilities required to deliver on this strategy, whether it's long term, when I say long term, the next 2 to 3 years, and even short term, now in the next 6 months. What are those capabilities? And then hire for that. And so to your point, Mike, I think you can build on those skills as long as you have a view of what that capability needs to be in the long term. When I say long term, it's really a couple of years. And you can begin building capabilities and skills based on that. And so I agree with you, Wendy, having worked in restaurants as well, there's always been this rule where we always try and say we want to promote 80 to 90% of people from within. And in the event that we're not ready yet and you need to get that skill from the outside, that's when you need to do that. And I think it's the role of leadership to make sure that, and I say this pretty basically, I think the role that I've played as a human capital leader is making sure that every leader who's responsible for people are getting their people ready so that when they step aside, they step out, they step up, that someone is right behind them ready to roll. And while there are things companies can do from a systemic standpoint, I also believe humans and leaders are responsible for that if they choose to be leaders of people. And so, I think organically that needs to be happening as well.
Enthusiastically, because I couldn't agree more. And I think too, that requires so much communication and conversation between the leaders and the employees, right?
Yes.
There's so much communication that doesn't happen in so many of the organizations that I've observed or been a part of. It needs to happen on a two-way street. It can't just be the leader kind of dictating, here's what needs to happen, and then not being available for feedback or discussion or conversation, right? The leader, especially in the scale, especially in the growth phase, needs to be present, needs to show up to work, needs to dig in right alongside when appropriate. The best bosses I've ever had, going back to my employee days, were not bosses, they were leaders. And a leader is not afraid to get in the trenches right there with you. A leader is not afraid to get in and show you the way. And I think there's so much in corporate culture where it's just like, okay, this is what's happening. Okay, good luck, everybody.
Right.
Feel free to ask questions. You might not get an answer. The leader needs to be available to have those discussions and provide clarification, those answers whenever possible and whenever those questions arise.
I want to take the conversation a slightly different way because as a solopreneur, an intentional solopreneur, so I've built businesses and I've had multiple businesses, including, as I said it before, 7 restaurants, but I am staying small. And when I say small, I just mean small as far as my team. And yes, I do have VAs and assistants. And yes, I am using AI, and it is a great tool. It is not a human replacement, but is an incredible tool. I look at scaling in different ways. So for when you start as a solopreneur, scaling means to me adding services, right? Or adding products, whether you start launching another group program or whether you have some digital courses you're selling. Scaling means adding to what you're offering. So scaling your offers. And I believe get your first offer right, get going, get that perfected, then add, then add, then add. So, you can't add too fast. But then there comes a point where you have a decision to make. And that decision becomes, do I stay where I am, right? I'm doing well, I'm making 7 figures, I take off when I want, I have a life, or do I grow? And the growth, let's say, let's use it in numbers, right? So let's say scaling is you're a solopreneur and you hit your 7 figures, you're making $1 million a year or high 6 figures. Well, then you have to decide, do I want to hit the next mark? And hitting the next mark does mean building a team. It means adding people into the mix. It also means growing pains because you're going to add people, you're going to train people, you're not going to be adding products and services at this time. And so your money is going to be less for long-term growth, like short-term losses for long-term growth. So that to me is the second economy of scale. And then you hit another milestone and you go, okay, now I need to, if I want to continue to expand, now I need somebody to step in and actually run the operation so I can keep continuing to do what I do. Because then you need a CEO or a COO to step in, like you have, Gerard, now a COO working with you. So there's steps, but you can stay as a solopreneur and still scale. And so as you started, and Marisa, you seem to be working with like really some of the big companies, but yet you're working on your own. So, you're going through it too. How, like, I just want your opinion on that. Like, do you think you can scale just by adding products and services, but then you make a lifestyle choice or you make a growth choice?
I mean, I think it's all of the above. And I say that because, and I'll think about it from now building a business. I agree with you. Scaling also means how many products and services do you want to have? And what I found the key to growth with Woof.work and with Best Pet Workplaces is, first of all, building a community and a movement of people who really do believe in the pet human animal bond in corporate America. I'll just say that within the sphere of the United States. And then we got really clear on the product. Initially, we thought we were going to do 5 things. I'll just say very high level. We were focusing on selling 5 things, but what I found was scaling was really when we got clarity again, going back to what was our purpose again? What values do we want to have? And part of it is joy, right? So creating joy. And when we got really clear on that and applied that all to the one, there's actually 2 services that we have now, that's where we're seeing the scaling happen. And so I think from a product standpoint, and I think even from an organization standpoint, and I know I've grown up in large organizations, you have to come with the mentality. And it's something that, Mike and Gerard said too, because I actually hate bureaucracy and corporations. And I know it's funny for me to say that, having worked in large companies, you need to grow up small. And what I mean by that is don't throw people against the opportunity. Look at what are ways you can stretch your people, how can they build their skills, et cetera, because that's what happens when there's an oversupply and people aren't being challenged, et cetera. So I think having that mentality of growing up small and having that all-in, purpose-driven culture, I think is really important. And then there becomes a point where the founders, to your point, are really great entrepreneurs and they're the visionaries. And when it gets to the scale where you need people really operating and delivering, if you become a public company or now you're VC backed and there's key or KPIs you need to be delivering, make sure that you're smart enough as a founder to know, hey, that's not my skill set. And how do I get the right people around me to make sure that we're doing the right things to continue to drive the scalable monetary growth that we're expected to have now, whether we're VC-backed, investors are believing in us, or even a public company. And I think that's the failure sometimes when founders don't see the capabilities required. So that's why I said I think it's a little bit of everything above, but again, goes back to real clarity on strategy, purpose, and values, and then also having that mentality, no matter how large you get, that you need to grow up small. So
I love that. Grow up small. That is a key takeaway from today. Gerard, before I hand it to you, and I know that you want to add to this, I just want to let anybody know that if they have any questions, to please put it in the chat. We will be answering questions. And if you're watching this on the replay, but you have questions, please put in the chat because we will monitor and one of us will come around and we'll answer it and let the other person know if it's specifically towards somebody. So please feel free to answer in the chat, whether you're watching now live or whether you're watching the replay. And Gerard, passing the mic over to you.
Yeah, I want to add to this point on growing up small, because what I take it to mean is, really having that core nucleus of people, that core community that really drives forth and sets the tone for the values of your organization and also how it operates. And I think by doing that too, you have the opportunity to have more people who know different parts of the business. So when you do scale and when you do have people, you have people on hand already who can at least teach those parts of the business to the people coming in. Whether those people have more advanced skill sets in those disciplines or not, you have people who understand how it works within the framework of your ecosystem, right? Which is a really important thing. We're telling artists all the time, you're not just a musician anymore. You are also a social media manager. You also need to understand certain basic fundamental aspects of starting a business, which honestly, a lot of them don't think of when they're starry-eyed in the beginning and they're thinking, I'm just going to, go busk on Broadway in Nashville and get discovered. There's so much business you have to know to scale your brand. And so much of it comes down to the fact that eventually you're going to want to delegate those things, right? And so it helps you and the people that you're working with to know what good is, to know what you're looking for. So you know what to expect or what you should be expecting as far as KPIs, as far as, what you should be seeing out of the growth of your business and your brand. But it takes the core nucleus of people understanding first how to execute on those things, why to execute on those things, so they can communicate that, teach that, and advise as time goes on.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, look who has joined us. Miss Jackie.
Hi, guys. I have some questions actually that have been sent to me. So whenever you guys are ready for that.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll just add is that I agree that having a strong network within the founder ecosystem that is closest to you. So I would say all across America, there are great startup ecosystems, founder ecosystems where you can build community. And I know for a lot of, especially founders of color, women may struggle a bit because it's a bit insular of a community sometimes, but it is really important to make those connections and to have the ability to talk to businesses at various stages of the life cycle of a startup or an entrepreneurial endeavor. I think for a lot of the entrepreneurs I've met in the past, they are serial entrepreneurs. So they sort of have to adjust to learning from the first few opportunities and then being able to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, start anew. And I also say it's okay to have seasons where you are thinking about high growth tech startup, and then you sort of shift your thought process to, well, maybe I want a lifestyle business. And that's okay to sort of change direction. There's a wild variety between lifestyle business and publicly organization. And it's okay to change your mind and decide that right now, what you want in this moment may have been different than what you had desired or thought about, in years past. And so scaling at different seasons of your life can feel different. And I think that's okay.
I love that. I love that. And you're right, right? And sometimes we really need to take a step back and think about it because we're working so hard towards the original goal and it's not bringing us that joy or that passion anymore. And sometimes it's because, you know what? Our goal has changed. And so we need to sit and, think about it, whether it's quarterly, whether it's, twice a year, and readdress where we are. And that's we can have another whole live talking about that, right? So Jackie, whenever you're ready, we would love to hear some of the questions that people have.
Yeah, absolutely. So first question, how does purpose influence profitability and what is the balance between maintaining a meaningful mission while ensuring financial success?
Ooh, who wants to take that one?
I can jump in on that because I was actually just part of a focus group earlier. And we were talking about, balancing purpose with growth, right? And purpose is so important to the journey of entrepreneurship in the sense that it's what's going to keep you going when times get tough. We all go through those ebbs and flows, right? We all have those peaks and valleys. And when we meet those valleys, right, it's not the prospect of, all the riches and accolades in the future that keep us going. It's why we do what we do, right? And also that purpose drives us forward in the good times as well, because when things are going well, it's like, okay, let's build on this momentum. Let's keep going. It's working. Let's keep leaning into that purpose. Let's keep leaning into that mission. And we've all experienced those times. We've all experienced those highs and those lows. And no matter what, like the core of why we do it needs to remain intact because that's what drives us forward to either further greatness or in times when we don't feel so great to figuring out why we don't feel so great, making the necessary adjustments and pivots and moving forward.
I like that. Okay, this one actually might be really relevant to Mike. Regarding people sustainability, how are we addressing the impact of AI on jobs obsolescence immediately? Like not in the future necessarily. Like what can people be doing today to, upskill?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is that for individuals, so for the worker, for them to be observant of what is AI and get super literate on AI. It's amazing. I saw headlines about judges that are getting upset at lawyers submitting cases with like references that are just hallucinations. And so it's clear that the folks that are attempting to use AI are doing it in a way that's unsafe, we'll say, right? Grappling with the fact that if you have this concern, the best way for you to get comfortable with it, get in that place of dealing with it, is to start scaling up and start. There's tons of free resources that are available. There's lots of flexibility in terms of using the tools at very low cost. So get comfortable, get familiar with it. Don't just do ChatGPT, but maybe also try Claude and also try Gemini, and just start to become familiar with some of the concepts around it and how you might apply it to your industry. Try and think about it as being an intrapreneur, right? Someone within an organization that starts to think about how they can add value to an organization, and don't be fearful of it, which I know can be challenging for people that are just not as comfortable with technology. Really need to embrace this in order to survive, because it's going to be everywhere if it isn't already. And it really is important for folks to see it as a way that it will help you do better once you understand how to use the tool. Back in the day, it used to be like, no one wanted the microwave. At the very beginning, microwaves were just like, oh, that could is so dangerous. We don't know what's going to happen. And now we know there's a time and a place for a toaster and a microwave and an air fryer. And, we just get comfortable with these different pieces of technology. I think people should look at AI the same way. It's just a tool, nothing to be afraid of. The robots are not coming to replace humans. There's still definitely value in making those human connections and having human beings do things.
Jumping from that a little daisy chain, Marisa, I think this will maybe be for you. You've been working with organizations at such large scales. Are you seeing anybody, or are you recommending anybody to leverage AI capabilities as a tool to further support or amplify the purpose component within an organization?
Wow. So how have we used AI to amplify the purpose component of an organization?
And really,
I
this
think,
was my question. I'm like, I haven't seen it done. And so I'm like, but can we? Like, why aren't we? It's like, this is a great tool. Like, maybe we
yeah,
should.
I mean, let's ideate. Like, I see my colleagues here nodding. I think about, again, if purpose is your North Star, and it's kind of adding on to what Gerard also said around how do you ensure the balance between profitability and purpose. And let me land kind of the answer. I think you can use AI and actually any one of the technologies as a large language model to feed in, set the context, right, of your purpose and values. This is what I think one would do. I'm thinking about one of the companies that I've been advising, especially, they have just crossed this. They went from 100 million in revenue, and now they're crossing this 300 million in the last year, right? And getting real clarity on purpose and values. You can utilize AI by setting clear context, building all of that in, and then feed in all of the, I look at what are all the people processes to hire and make decisions on people, whether it's hiring, managing and setting expectations, evaluating performance and development, if you want to go down that people route. But then also look at the business decision filters that you have, and through AI, really do a quick audit on, are you really living, there's ways you can quantify it, living your purpose. And so that's probably, we have to double click on that, but high level, I can see that you can definitely use AI to actually speed up the process to do that, because I know there's a lot of new tools out there that are utilizing AI to help you hire people for the right values, to help you assess if you're living your culture, and so why wouldn't you do that to really evaluate, are you really scaling in a way that is true to your purpose? And anecdotally, we know that, but perhaps there's a way you can look at that quantitatively using AI.
I love it. Yeah. Last question, Wendy, this is going to go to you. From Jay Brown, how do I build a community of entrepreneurs to connect with as I grow my freelance work in strategic operations and project management? So maybe not
Well, that's
her own personal purpose.
You know what? So, how do you grow a community? First of all, LinkedIn is one of the best places that you could grow a community. And so, not reaching out to people who are your ideal client, but people who are adjacent and people who work with people who be your ideal client. Reach out in the DMs. Make sure you're engaging with their posts. Reach out, have a virtual coffee, speak to somebody. Jackie, we all met Jackie here on LinkedIn, and she brought us all together. She's the founder of Idea Citizen, but that's how you build a community. You have to show up and you reach out, even if it feels a little uncomfortable at first because you're reaching out to a stranger, but strangers become friends. And recently I put together an in-person live event in New York City with people I met here on LinkedIn. We had a LinkedIn panel and we're just building our community, and we actually think we're going to take it on the road. But it started with conversations in the posts, engagement in the posts, which then went to conversations in the DMs, which then went to virtual coffees and in real life meetups. That's the best way I can think of when it comes to like using social media. LinkedIn's the best place. And then just showing up at the networking events, and don't network to try and pitch your product, network to build relationships, because those relationships are what turns into meeting other people that are your ideal client who may need your products or services.
Love it. That's it. That's it for the questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for putting this together. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I would love to have a part two, because I think we could talk not even just about scaling, but so many different things when it comes to entrepreneurship. You know, I heard little nuggets along the way from everybody, and I just think that I'm looking forward to the next time you put this together, Jackie.
I've been sitting here listening to this conversation. I'm like, wow, just thank you everybody for bringing such great, insightful information. I've gotten a lot out of this, and I want to encourage everybody that's listening also, please go follow each and every one of these wonderful speakers. I look forward to following along each and every one of your journeys.